Hello from Bertigaland. I'm Jane and today we are joined by Jeff Coulton. Welcome, Jeff.
Thank you, Jane.
So, Jeff, we met last term when I studied the AFM subject.
Correct.
Would you mind telling us a little bit more about your background and how you get to where you are now?
Sure. I'm actually an escaped former corporate lawyer of all things.
Yeah.
So I'd been, when I was studying, I was over at Sydney University for my undergraduate. None of us wanted to go down to law school. Law school was housed in a different building to the rest of campus. It was in the city and it was like a dark airport hangar. It was awful. And so my way of getting out of going down to law school was to do an honours year in commerce.
Okay.
And so that exposed me to doing some research and exposed me to doing some teaching. And then after I finished the law degree, I spoke with my old supervisor. He said to me, "Oh, look, if you ever want to come back, would be interested." After a couple of years working as a lawyer, I decided no, that wasn't for me for various reasons.
Yeah.
Ended up giving him a call and came back, ended up doing a PhD and I've been doing some teaching and research since then.
What was the one thing that you think was the turning point when you were a corporate lawyer? What made you turn away from that
Well,
life?
it wasn't one thing, Jen. It was a combination of factors. I was able to take a look around at the partners at the law firm and say, who would I want to be in 10 years' time?
Yeah.
And could honestly say none of them. It just, they weren't happy, it wasn't pleasant.
Yeah.
So that I guess the amount of work relative to the happiness that it gave them didn't make sense. So that was a big thing. I had really enjoyed the teaching and the research experience that I'd had, so that was always in the back of my mind as something that was of interest. And I also, a very good friend of mine who is still a lawyer and is as a partner at one of the big law firms now, having come back from being general counsel in a private sector company. I'd been very good friends with him and remained very good friends with him. And whenever we were having legal discussions, he could always see 4 or 5 steps further down the chessboard than I could.
Yep.
And I knew that eventually that would come and cost a client some money.
Yeah.
There was always going to be people like Andrew who were just better at seeing the field of play than I was.
Yeah.
So it was a combination of things like that.
Yeah.
But, it was funny at the time that I did tell the law firm that I was going to go back to university. The number of partners that when I spoke to said, "I wish I could do that," was amazing. But they just adjusted their lifestyle to the salary.
Yeah. What they needed.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. And how was the transition when you went back to uni and studied commerce degree? Did you feel like, okay, I think this might be for me?
When I initially did commerce law as an undergrad, like a lot of people at the time, because I didn't like blood and didn't want to do medicine, and that was the next thing that everyone did. So it was kind of a default option for a lot of us. But it turned out to be something that was enjoyable. So I thought, well, do I want to go and teach law? Do I want to teach the business side of things? And thought there was a broader scope for teaching on the business side of things. So that's why I ended up going back and
So you knew you were going to teach.
Probably not until I'd done that honours year halfway through the degree program. Although, having said that, while I was going through university, I had spent some time working as a tutor for one of the educational centres in our local little area and had really enjoyed that. But I hadn't linked that with, I could do teaching as more of a full-time job. But that was something that I'd really enjoyed.
Okay.
But that was, to me at the time, that was just a way of paying the bills. That was part-time work.
Yeah. Okay, all right. So you did your undergrad at Sydney Uni, and your postgrad here?
Correct.
Why the switch? Is there any particular reason why you chose UNSW?
It was probably just good to have a change in scenery and a change in personnel.
Yeah.
The person that I wanted to work with as a supervisor, Stephen Taylor, who's now down at UTS, he was over here. And UNSW at the time had, I think, just a better group of researchers in the area that I was interested in. So as a strong research culture, a strong research group.
Yeah.
So it was, interesting to come to.
Yeah. Okay. So commerce itself has quite a broad range of specifications, right? We have accounting, marketing, management, and so on and so forth. What drew you to accounting specifically?
Well, most of the teaching that I do and the research is I guess it would be in between accounting and finance. And so it's the sort of the intersection that I think is interesting. It's the ways in which market participants are likely to use accounting or other related information. As what I find interesting.
Yeah. What I really learned from the subject that you thought was that ability to really see beyond the numbers and how the numbers actually create that picture about the company.
That's I think that's a really important. I'm glad you got that insight or the takeaway from the course, because I think that's really important. Is that the accounting numbers will help tell the story, but understanding the business behind that is like a really important first step in trying to get an appreciation of what it might mean if we're approaching this sort of as an outsider, which again a lot of the I guess the research I'm doing is viewing things from an outsider's perspective, and the financial analysis type courses that we do is really taking an outsider's perspective rather than a financial statement creation course, which would be slightly different.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. So last time when you taught the AFM, you are in a room full of 50 other very opinionated people. Does it get a little bit too much sometimes?
Look, if it's 50 hard people, 50 intelligent, successful people who are likely to have an opinion versus 50 people who aren't going to open their mouths, which is kind of some of the alternative cohorts. Not the full-time MBA is an unusual beast. But given that versus during COVID, I had some courses where it was just a blank Zoom wall of, as I said, this is the non-MBA courses. Give me 50 opinionated people that are happy to speak at any day. But it is... it's an interesting dynamic. But no, it's fun. It's so I said, the more engagement, the more viewpoint you can get from the students, the better the course is going to be. 100%.
I think at times it is an assertive opinion, but at times it's just frustration that people need to vent out.
Absolutely. Well, and for a lot of these introductory courses that we do, the tension or the difficulty, the balance that we're trying to strike in class is you want to pitch it somewhere where it's not so overwhelming for people who haven't had any experience, just get lost. And certainly with kind of that first 4 weeks of financial accounting, it's a steep learning curve if you haven't been there before. So you want to make sure people aren't lost, but by the same token, you don't want it pitched at a point where people that do have some familiarity are just bored. And that's always I guess the tension is trying to strike that balance.
Okay. All right, well, you look happy now. That is all over. Anyway, I also wanted to ask, what's the most rewarding thing from your work?
Oh, that's a great question. I guess there are different components to my work that give me different types of satisfaction. I spend a lot of time here doing coaching and advising teams that compete in international business case competitions. And that's...
I saw material of yours actually not too long ago, just this week.
Okay.
Yeah, we're doing a case practice, and one of them was Tribal Warrior.
Okay.
Anyway, sorry.
That was from a recent competition that we'd hosted this, and so most of this is with undergraduate students, but what we get to see there is some of the best of our undergraduate students attacking real world problems in front of senior executives from the relevant case organisations, and they just produce unbelievable work in 3, 5, 24 hours, whatever it happens to be. And it tends to be something that they will sort of be in contact with us in subsequent years saying that was the single best experience that we had at university. Because it ties everything together in a way that, particularly for an undergraduate program, is difficult to do, but I know universities are trying to change that and make that more what
Available.
we'd call work integrated learning, let's call it,
Yep.
call it that. For the teaching more generally, kind of seeing the light bulb go on is nice, and just working out different ways of trying to explain something so that you can
Yep.
kind of see that, now I get it.
Yeah, yeah.
And for a lot of the, I guess, the accounting or the financial analysis type work, it is just particularly for the MBA students, you have an understanding of how business works, you have an understanding of business transactions. So it's just a case of trying to get how do I explain it till I see that light bulb goes on.
Yep.
And on the research side of things, it's, I guess the enjoyable thing about being an academic is the fact that you get to choose your own research agenda, that you can kind of pick and choose and do the things that are of interest there.
Yep. Which actually leads me to the next point. One of your research focus is about space exploration and the commercialization with feasibility of it. So where are we heading?
That came about. I've been doing for probably 6 or 7 years now. Work with both the mining engineering faculty and electrical engineering faculty, and we've supervised. I've co-supervised some mining engineering PhD students and electrical engineering PhD students. But the particular focus is on, I guess, let's call it broadly, the economics of space, or the economics of space resource utilisation. And there's the economics, there's the legal, there's the ethical, and there's the engineering technical aspects that are all being tied together. But certainly I think we do have, we will see, and the time frame will be interesting, we will see resource utilisation on the moon, we will see it eventually on Mars. We've been able to land little rovers on asteroids, which is technically phenomenal. Obviously the legality and the ethics,
Aside.
leaving that
Yeah,
aside. At the moment, the economics is driven by two things. It's we're not going to be utilising resources to bring them back to Earth. That's not where things work. Because if it's in sufficient quantity to obtain, let's say on an asteroid or on Mars, if it was sort of a valuable metal, for example, so gold or whatever it happens to be, if that comes back to Earth, in that quantity, it will lower the prices. So so where the economics of it works is it's saved launch costs is what we're all doing. So if I don't have to get water up to my Mars base or my lunar base, then that saves me a lot of money. If I don't have to get rocket fuel, then that also saves me a lot of money. Where that's interesting is that a lot of work, in particular in the last decade, that SpaceX and Elon has been doing, has been rapidly driving down launch costs.
Right.
And so that's making a lot of these blue sky projects, sort of pun intended, a lot of projects that were economically not viable are going to become more viable. So the commercial, it's still incredibly risky, and I think it's still going to require, at the moment, sort of billionaire type funding rather than sort of investment bank funding. But it's certainly the cost profile is dropping dramatically.
How do they do that, other than the resources, I guess? How do they drive down the cost?
Oh, they were just incredibly innovative, and in particular the reusable rockets.
Yep.
So they're making the rockets that can land and be reused means it's so much cheaper.
Yep.
They were also able to make the rockets themselves for a lot less than what rockets were kind of available on the market for at the time.
Okay, so innovation.
It was innovation, and what Elon likes to call first principles thinking is like, what do we actually need in a rocket? And so it's been fascinating to watch that happen, and it is, so the economics are changing all the time.
Yep.
In the projects that were not economically viable may at some point become economically viable.
Okay, so when would that be, you think? In the next decade, or a few decades, or centuries?
In the next decade,
Wow.
I would say.
Okay, so single digit.
Yep.
Wow, okay.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask about financial statement and its impact on capital market. Do you think it's human nature to rig the system, or would people usually like to do the right thing, but we're just looking at the opposite of survivorship bias, I guess.
It's the newspapers don't like a story that says
Yeah.
a company's financial statements were fine
Yeah.
and investors didn't lose their money.
Yeah.
That's so we always, if we base it on the media reports, if we base it on regulator actions, it's always looking at the ones that didn't work. I think we certainly know that there are incentives in certain circumstances for certain firms to try and get financial statement outcomes. The research overall says, look, to the extent that we can detect it, there probably is on average some going on, but not as much as people might imagine.
Yep.
I mean, by and large, I think people that are running businesses are trying to do the right thing.
Yeah. Okay. In some markets, there's some countries, right? Some developing countries where things are a little bit more flexible and not as developed.
It's a combination of what are the rules and what's the enforcement mechanisms.
Right.
And I guess what's also the potential payoff profile as well.
Yeah.
Though this often comes up in our research seminars when people are looking at kind of earnings management or earnings manipulation in various, on a country by country basis. One counter argument is that if we're in an environment with lower, I guess, legal protection for, say, minority shareholders, you don't need to use earnings management. You can use contracts with family connections and so on. There are more effective ways to be naughty. If you want to do that, you don't need to do it through
much
the
more
financial
effective
statement.
shortcuts.
Correct.
Okay. All right. But overall, in Australia, I guess, or somewhere quite similar with the Australian economy, I think it's quite fair to say that most people like to do the right thing. It's just that.
Yeah, and we see the same thing with, I guess, the auditors, and the audit firms will be criticised for the audits that don't go well, but a huge percentage of the audits don't have problems.
Yeah.
And I know that there's always ASIC have just released a recent research report into kind of audit quality. One of the things that people are concerned about in the auditing field is, in particular, it's the consulting fees, so the non-audit fees.
Yep.
So if I'm doing business consulting or advisory or some of the tax work, and does that lead to economic dependence, which might then compromise the independence that we know is really important for the auditors. The work that I've done on that, looking into that, says that there isn't a link between a higher level of client importance for the non-audit stuff and bad accounting outcomes. So again, this is the research that I do tends to be in what they call empirical archival. So I'll look at financial statements and either outcomes of those financial statements. So were there restatements, were there going concern opinions, was there an abnormally high level of accruals, things like that. And on average, over time, we don't see evidence that's consistent with the state of problems. Again, are there one-off examples of where things go awry? Absolutely. But the on-average evidence doesn't trouble me as much as the bad news stories would suggest.
Okay, that's good to know. So this was during the first few weeks of AFM. You mentioned that you were one of the witness of a case. It might have been JB Hi-Fi, or it could be someone quite similar. Peggy mentioned a company, and he said, "Oh no, I think it's this other company because you're involved in the." Are you able to tell us a little bit more about that, and maybe if it's confidential in nature, just the key takeaways?
Yeah, what I've done a bit of work as an expert witness for. It's typically in class action lawsuits in either the Supreme Court or the federal court, where the role of an expert witness is to try and advise the court on particular issues, and usually the question I'm asked is, had the accounting not been bad, or had certain business practices not been bad, or had certain disclosures been made, what would have been the impact on the share price?
Right.
Dick Smith was one that I was involved
Dick
in I was doing some work on that. Then there were 3 or 4 different class actions merged into one. So I didn't actually kind of end up in court on that one.
Okay.
But that was an interesting one because we got to see some of the internal material and some of the material that you don't normally get to see as an outside investor. And the Dick Smith liquidation, or the Dick Smith bankruptcy, was a combination of bad accounting, so what I would call non-compliance with the accounting rules, and also it was bad business decisions that were trying to achieve particular accounting outcomes. So back to our earlier, so is there earnings management? Yeah, Dick Smith were, sorry, yes, it was Dick Smith. Yeah, Dick Smith were buying inventory that they didn't have any realistic prospects of selling because they were obtaining rebates at the time, and they were treating the rebates for an accounting purpose in a way that they shouldn't have been doing to try and overstate their earnings.
Right. Okay.
And it was an interesting sort of corporate history where they'd previously been owned by Woolworths and they'd then been taken private by a private equity firm and then had relaunched. So some of the naughtiness took place before they went IPO again, and then some continued during post-IPO.
Yep.
One of the things that we do know is that firms, when they put out an IPO prospectus, have to make forecasts about what they think the future performance will be. There's certainly evidence that suggests that on average those forecasts are optimistic.
Yeah.
And then firms will have an incentive to try and meet those forecasts.
Yeah.
And so that's where it gets in. So there are, as I said, incentives matter. So where will we look? We'll look at firms that have put out IPO forecasts and then see how they fared and do we think that they achieve those kind of fairly, or do we think they might be?
How long does it usually take for you to reach a conclusion from the time they IPO? Because it might take a while for them to realize the revenues, right?
Oh, and this was, I think, some of both the business practices and the reporting was taking place before IPO, but it wouldn't have been apparent to an investor in the IPO that this was going on. Yeah. Because it looked like they were being more responsible with inventory management, whereas in fact the opposite was happening. So, and again, that's why we end up with the class action lawsuit, as had they been forthcoming with investors at the time, probably it would have been IPO for a different price.
Right. Okay. So were you able to determine the difference in price, in share price?
It's an imprecise art at best.
Okay.
It's the question, I guess, becomes the court's trying to determine were there any kind of breaches of the law or breaches of things like the continuous disclosure regime, and if so, what was the economic loss suffered by the shareholders at the time? And so that's typically comparing what share price at the time of the alleged wrong versus what would have been the case had that information been disclosed.
And then would they need to pay the difference to the shareholders?
And the difference normally is so the economic loss becomes the damages that the shareholders get, and of course the lawyers get their cut.
Of course,
so the class action system is very good for the lawyers. So it's imprecise, but we do the best we can.
How long does it take, or did it take you to complete the whole investigation?
On that one, I didn't actually get to the end of the whole investigation, as I said, because the various class actions got merged, and I kind of wasn't all the way through. On some of the other ones that I was working on, the HIH insurance, the Royal Commission, or proceedings that came out of the HIH Royal Commission, the class action there, that was years. It was like a several-year process. Wow. Again, because in a lot of cases that was sort of lawyerly shenanigans in trying to slow down proceedings.
I like that technical term, lawyerly shenanigans. Okay, nice.
So just the administrative process in the judicial system is slow.
Okay, perfect. Where do you think in the world is the best place to work as a financial accountant, and why?
The where to work now is becoming interesting. I guess if we're still going to be client facing and client dealing, you want to be somewhere where there's interesting work, assuming we're not kind of doing all remote work. So you're probably, I think on that basis, assuming that you want to work, I guess interesting clients is probably going to be confined to, let's call them financial centres. So I'd be probably saying it's probably our standard pick. Sydney's obviously a good one. Sydney, London, New York, Chicago, Singapore would all be good candidate cities.
Yeah.
Any major financial centre.
Yep. Okay. So not the
Yeah.
Virgin Islands.
Oh no, that's more the tax minimisation, and that's more just a shop front with someone there. No, if you can run your fund out of the Virgin Islands, that's fine. But no, I'm not sure. No, I don't think that'd be the place to work. You're probably, in fact, you're going to get more of the financial accountants will be working. They'll be working in North America that are dealing with Virgin Island clients.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So we've seen each other on the campus before, and you mentioned that you have 2 kids.
Correct.
A boy and a girl.
Yes.
I stumbled into your YouTube account, and I see a lot of Bly.
Oh,
but not much of your son. Do you think that you might have a favorite there?
That's. I haven't checked that for ages. Certainly, Bly likes being filmed more than Archie does.
Okay, all right.
She's always. They're quite different in personality, and Bly definitely wants photos taken, wants to be filmed all the time. Yeah.
All right. Do you think that one of them will follow your footsteps? Either from law or commerce background?
Ooh, too early to tell, but I doubt it. Yeah.
Are they more
I
creative?
think, Bly's more creative. Archie's probably more maths engineering focus.
Yeah. Okay. Nice.
So I suspect not.
Yeah.
That would be my guess.
Okay, perfect. So we have some questions for Quickfire Friday. Are you up for Quickfire session?
Absolutely.
Okay, so we have 2 minutes to answer these questions. Ready? What do you do for you?
For me, bike riding.
Nice. Wine or beer?
Ooh, wine.
Okay. What's your ultimate guilty pleasures?
Bike riding, then beer.
Perfect.
Or skiing. I like skiing.
Okay.
Skiing with the family is great.
Yeah, okay. So you've been given $100 million to invest, and it's only this one company, so you don't have any other options. And you can the financials are a bit murky, so you can either choose one, either the financial statement or the cash flow. Which one would you choose and why?
Do you mean income statement or cash?
Yes, I know. I'll stop it up. Balance sheet or cash flow statement.
If
Is
it
that
was,
right?
yeah. Well, we've got the income statement, the balance sheet, and the cash flow statement. I want all 3.
Balance sheet and income statement. Yeah.
Income statement if I'm forced to choose one.
Why?
Over time, a firm that can generate earnings is likely to be the firm that can generate cash flows. Regardless of the balance sheet or regardless of the cash flows, if you're not profitable and if you're not likely to become profitable, then it'll be hard to stay in business. So, despite the fact that cash is king and you have to be able to generate cash, over time, the difference between earnings and cash flow they become close to the same thing. So really the difference between earnings and cash flow is we're chopping the world up into smaller time periods and earnings becomes more informative the smaller the time period.
Yep. Perfect.
I know
Great.
that's running out. Using up too much of our 2 minutes.
No, that's all right. What's your power song?
It changes all the time. I don't have a power song.
Do you have any default one when you're on the bike? Do you put any?
Oh no, I'm scared of Sydney traffic, so I don't. I don't ride with headphones in.
All right, if you have to choose
at the
one.
moment, my daughter's going through a Beatles phase of all things.
Way.
We went through the Baby Shark phase.
Yeah. Yes. We went through that as well.
And now they're teaching them rock at school, and so she's asking for a whole bunch of old Beatles.
Okay.
She's gone through Blackpink.
What's Blackpink?
Blackpink, it's a female version of BTS. It's a Korean pop group.
Okay, all right, okay.
Yeah, so it's K-pop.
Okay.
Yeah,
Very cool.
and Archie's going through more of he went through an Arctic Monkeys phase.
Okay, cool.
Which I saw in a hilarious quote yesterday is, Arctic Monkeys, yeah, they're the band that my dad used to like when I was really young. And I thought, time is cruel and unstoppable.
All right, and why do you do what you do?
I like the flexibility that it gives me. I like the teaching side of it, and I like the research. So when one becomes frustrating, you've got other aspects that will make it.
Especially when you've got 50 MBA students shouting at you.
Look, the teaching's fun. It's most academics will probably tell you it's the administration side of things that becomes tiring.
Yeah. Okay. And last question, what do you want to be remembered for?
From the students, hopefully someone that was able to explain concepts in a way they could understand would be nice. Yeah, that'll do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, clear explanations.
Yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
Well, Jeff, thank you so much for being here.
Pleasure,
really
Jane.
Appreciate meeting you and learning from you. And yeah, let's
Great.
keep in touch.
Thank you, Jane. All the best.
Thank you. So thank you so much for listening. If you like our conversation, press the like button and leave us some comment. And don't forget to press the subscribe button so that the next video will go straight to your box. See you next time.